And that's why I think it's a good time to learn some grammar. What? Now did I stammer? Work on that grammar. You should know it. It's less for its viewer. Oh, yeah. Like people who were never raised in a sewer. I hate these word crimes. Like I could care less. That means you do care. At least a little. Be a moron. Hey, you better slow down.
Hi everyone, I'm Kit, and I'm here to talk about the different varieties of English. You know, the different kind of English you use when you find yourself in different situations, different times and places, depending on who you're talking to, the level of familiarity, depending on the context, etc. So, we have the standard and the non-standard. Under standard, you have formal and informal, and then slang and dialect, of course. I know you've heard about slang and dialect, especially now we're in the internet age. So, let's start. Given the following situations, how do you think you will respond? For example, you're trying to apply for a PhD or maybe a master's degree after you finish college. Are you going to use informal or formal English? Can you simply say, I want a PhD in awesomeness. So it would be cool if you grant it to me. Let's see how they'd react. And how about if you find yourself inviting a close friend for coffee? Formal would be, for example, will you tell your friend, it is my honor and privilege to be drinking this kapeng barako with you. How does that sound compared with let's grab a chair and let's have coffee? Another situation. On your maybe third or fourth year, you're going to be writing your thesis. So what kind of English will you use? Academic writing, take note. So I found this cool website, Long My Thesis. They use Twitter to publish their thesis. I mean, the main points of their thesis. So what they did is, in 140 characters, the students submitted from all around US, I think, what their thesis is about. So let's have several examples. For example, you're studying ancient philosophy. This student tweeted, turns out almost everything is a waste of time. Do you think that will be acceptable to your dean or to your advisor, thesis advisor? Another one, sustainability is basically a chance for universities to participate in hollow, humble bragging. Good point. Having toys and bright colors in their cages makes mice smarter in their brains. Multidimensional black holes are not just for Matthew McConaughey. Those interstellar fans can relate. And this one from a student of physics who said, we found nothing we were looking for, but somehow it's a significant nothing. If only this kind of informal English is acceptable in academic writing, then perhaps students will be more prolific in thesis writing. But we know better. Another example is, since you're freshmen, probably your mom, your dad will be calling you time and again, checking your situation here in UP. Formal or informal? Will you tell your mom? For example, your mom tells you, so how's UP? Will you answer, UP being the premier university is currently equipping me with the know-how, the knowledge, and the skills for me to etc. etc. Of course, how do you think your mom will react? So, another example, in an essay question, can you answer here? For example, the question is, what is this? Be sure to provide clear evidence in support of your existence. A student might answer, I exist because, or the point of my existence is big letter Y-O-L-O, YOLO. Or finally, another very practical example is, how will you tell someone you like him or her? Informal or informal English? Can you use slang? Or maybe poetry? So with this in mind, try to reflect because we will delve now into the different levels of usage in the English language. First one is the standard English, and the second one is the non-standard. So, standard is actually spoken and written by the majority of educated speakers. So try to think, by educated, what exactly do we mean? So if it's educated, then you can find this language in the industry, in business, in government. So most probably the elite class or perhaps the middle class. They're considered standard because they have very little variation in the grammar across regions. So most probably, these words that fall under standard English have been institutionalized, or you can say formalized, included in the English corpus. Because you see, the meanings of words are very slight as compared with informal English. As compared with slang. Okay. The next example or the next kind is the non-standard English. This is mainly spoken language. So if they're spoken language, they're more popular, you can say. But the thing is, if it's non-standard, they're used by certain social, regional, or ethnic groups. So you can say that the grammatical constructions, the vocabulary, the word choices, the pronunciations are quite different from the accepted rules of standard English. So to make this point clearer, because these are just definitions, let's have examples based on, because there are several factors that determine what exactly the level of or the kind of English which is more appropriate to use depending on the time, place, and occasion. Just like the examples of the situations I gave a while ago. So let's have the standard English first. Standard may be either formal or informal. So the first one is formal because it follows the traditional standards of correctness. And if you see look at the sentences, they're very much complex sentence structures, and a very extensive vocabulary. So you're not allowed to make contractions like I am going to. You should spell that out instead of saying I'm gonna, or I want to instead of saying I wanna. And you cannot have casual expressions as well. So this is the language of schools and universities. So that means if you turn in your paper, like your thesis, or if you're reciting, as in recitation that you need to use formal English, then it has to be standard. Okay. One example here, look at the construction of sentences. As the definition says, formal English, very complex vocabulary, the complex structure of sentences. Like this one, this is I got this from our course outline, which talks about the attendance policy. So this chunk of paragraph actually is composed of only 2 sentences. Imagine, 2 sentences. And if you read all that, the point is simply, if you exceed 6 absences, then you get 5. That's it. But based on the construction, because it's part of academic policy, then it's really quite formal. Another example is the language of the government. I got this from the Philippine Constitution. It's actually the preamble. So look at the words used. We have sovereign, imploring, patrimony, posterity, democracy, promulgate, equality, peace, etc. So these are words that we do not use every day. You don't often hear them in conversational English, perhaps when someone is orating, maybe, but not in casual spoken English. Another one is the language and legal documents. Like this is a ruling from a justice secretary regarding one of the ill-fated cases which happened here in Los Baños involving the murder and the rape of one of a former student by the then mayor of Calauan. So according to the judge, say, and so we come to hear another tale of woe of an infamous public figure and his minions indicted for having raped and killed a young lady and a budding lad. So if you notice the construction, it's really more complex, and you will not really use ignominious, orchestrate, or hatched in hell in ordinary spoken language. Another one, formal is also used by most businesses. So, for example, you have two sentences here. The first sentence is, the economy is currently quite robust. Nevertheless, some specialists predict an imminent recession. So, if you look at the sentence structure, it's a compound sentence connected by a conjunctive adverb, nevertheless. Look at that. And so, you can really tell it's formal as compared with this one. Same meaning. The two sentences have the same meaning, but this one, the second sentence is quite informal. You say, the economy is very strong. Robust versus strong. Right now versus currently. Currently versus right now. And then soon. We'll have a recession soon compared with imminent. Imminent, which means something about to happen. So more formal choices as compared with the very informal choices in the second sentence. Which brings us to informal English. So if formal English is mostly used by educated speakers most of the time in writing, or in informal English uses a smaller vocabulary than formal English, uses shorter sentences, and you can now use contractions and casual expressions. So let's have examples. So in the newspapers, every time you read it, it seems the writer is talking to you like in second person. For example, here, this one is from Rappler. Where in Southeast Asia should you travel next? So very, very informal. Next one, in advertisements. So it will blow your mind away. Blow your mind. Notice the word choice or the phrase used. This is a phrasal verb. You will not say, for example, the results of my study or this study blew the minds of all researchers. Like in thesis, you will not typically read or see those kinds of terms. But in informal English, since they're mostly spoken, you can now use phrasal verbs, idioms, etc. Okay? On television, you also see that in personal letters as well. So here, hi Lynn, no problem, I'll pick you up. So they're not very strict on the punctuation. If you notice that, the use of dash is quite flexible, and you can use I'll instead of I will. And then in casual conversation, of course. So here, there's a contraction. That's a construction for there is. I'd love, I would love to take you there. So that's the basic difference between formal and informal. And here in the next slide, we have a couple more examples. So fabricate, it's so formal, it's makeup. Or leave out, informal. If you want a formal choice, omit. And the other table you can see here, I'm sorry as compared to I apologize. Or look at as compared with examine. Okay, different examples. So we go to the next level of usage, which is non-standard English. This one includes slang and dialect. But when you say non-standard, it doesn't mean incorrect English. They're appropriate if used in the appropriate context as well. So for example, slang. We know many slang words and we use them every day. These are words that usually enjoy a very short popularity, but some of the words through years and constant usage actually enter, you can say they graduate from being slang to informal and then later on formal English. So slang is actually associated with counterculture. So maybe people who first use the words share the same knowledge, most of the time of popular culture. For example, in Facebook, we use the word friending. The word friend doesn't really have a verb form, but you can add ing and it's acceptable on Facebook. Like the word hashtag is also now acceptable. They're slang. So how do slang words originate really? These originate among groups sharing a common social bond or activity. So maybe they think it's cool, so the way they form it's very spontaneous, very lively, creative speech process. So other researchers say slang are likely to be circulated for a decade before they'll be written down and used for, informal English or formal English perhaps. So slang, or although non-standard, they're very colorful. They add life to our expressions. They're very expressive, but most of the time short-lived. So these are the examples. So crib. Before they used to mean crib. The word crib used to mean a small bed for baby, but now it's a general term for house. Like let's go to our crib, to my crib, for example. Lol, which now means laugh out loud. Gay is synonymous to being lively or happy, but now it's generally a derogatory term which means homosexual. So with fit, mint, you talk about, it refers to the flavor, but now we say your car's mint, in excellent condition, for example. Other examples of slang. I'm bursting. Well, it actually means I need to go to the toilet very soon. I'm starving, extremely hungry. I'm stuffed. I've eaten a lot and I can't eat more. Okay? Or someone tells you, how are you doing? And you say, I'm great. Or I'm wrecked, which means I'm extremely tired. And if you're angry about something, you say, I'm pissed off. And we also have the SMS, the internet slang. So if you use this, because they're non-standard, it's really preferable that you do not use them in academic papers. Okay? Now we go to dialect. It's the second type of non-standard English. Dialect actually is derived from the Greek word dialectos, which means discourse, dia, which means true, and lego, which means I speak. This kind of language is so distinctive and so unique because it's peculiar to a specific social or ethnic group. It is restricted to a specific geographical location. So it becomes a dialect. If you will notice they have their own regional speech patterns and they're used by specific social classes. With the dialect, it has its own vocabulary, it has its own grammar and syntax. But why do we consider them non-standard? It's because dialect differ from the standard usage of educated speakers. But again, it doesn't mean it's an inferior language. It just so happens that only a particular group use this kind of language. You might notice this in movies, in American movies, where characters speak a different kind of dialect, such as Southern American or Western Australian, and it's not easy to understand the dialect. For example, the phrase "I done that" will not pass as standard English, but it's very much acceptable as dialect. Another example, "I seen that." You should say informal English, you should say "I have seen that" or "I saw that." So you will notice here that dialect do not follow standard usage, but if the point of communication is understanding each other, then dialect actually does its job. Other examples from literature. This one is from Huck Finn. With safe, Huck was safe. So that means we are safe. It might not be, So it's hard to understand at first. This one is from To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I want to know. At first sight, you can see the grammatical error there. That's why it's considered non-standard, but not necessarily inferior language. So this line is translated to this: I want to know why you are bringing white children to a church for Negroes. So if you're part of the same culture or group or element of proximity, you're near the geographic location where the dialect arose, then there's a better chances of you understanding the language. But if not, it's non-standard and therefore doesn't fall into the category of standard, formal, or informal English. So I hope that's clear. Visit and answer the link below, and we'll have more exercises in our lecture class this coming week. Stay safe, everyone. Cheers!